Hey Browns fans, welcome to the Brownie Points podcast. Here are the segments that we're going to be covering this week. Has the last few weeks dissuaded you from the idea of bringing Jameis back next year? Then of course we got to talk about Nick Chubbs' injury. That one really hurt. Then we're going to talk about, are the Browns still a QB away? And then of course we're going to wrap it up with our Brownie Point segment, which is where we award Brownie Points to the players and to the standout players on offense and on defense. And Levi's going to get us started. Just a heads up, Levi's throat is a little shaky today, so hopefully we'll be able to make it through. He's powering through it as best he can. So Levi, has the last few weeks dissuaded you from the idea of bringing Jameis back next year?
It really has, and I don't think that's totally shocking. And a lot of people were calling for Joe Flacco, for example, last year, but if you watch him with the Colts this year, when he came back up first, he looked good. And it was exciting, and then he petered out. That happens. There's a reason why the Browns didn't bring her back, and it actually was the right decision. A lot of even the way he was playing then, as much as he was putting up top-tier career yards, his interception ratio was pretty terrible. And so sooner or later, that wasn't going to work out, and that's just the way it always is in the NFL, and that's what happened. And he petered out, and that's how it is. And Jameis kind of having the same issue. He's got a little longer track record of putting up some production too, so keep in mind some of the defenses he's been playing. You hope that he can turn it around. You're not playing Casey's defense and at least be entertaining again, because the Browns might be losing, but at least I want to be entertained on Sunday. That would be an advantage.
His interceptions, he threw 3 against the Chiefs, 2 against the Steelers, 3 against the Broncos, 1 against the Steelers. Then he had no picks, then 3 against the Chargers. Now, all of those are actually solid to very good defenses, but still, that's just a lot.
Well, and also 3 against the Broncos, but he also threw a ton of yards and touchdowns. Against Chiefs, he just wasn't, and there were opportunities. And look, it's not 100% on him, but one thing I do want to mention is I thought Dorsey, again, went through a long period of time where he forgot about that underneath ball that Judy's so good at, and other guys, 10 yards. Not every ball has to be 25 yards downfield. Sometimes you got to take what the defense is giving you, and so take advantage of those. You're having trouble connecting, let's go back to some of the underneath stuff. Not super underneath, but underneath. Get back in a rhythm, and then you go back deep later in the game. For a long time, the game was still in hand. They weren't scoring at a high clip. Eventually it got out of hand, but it took a long time. So there wasn't such a need to throw it so far downfield all the time. You're just panicking for no reason. I would have liked to see them go back to that. But at the same time, Jameis made so many stupid decisions on first down, too, at times, and just chucking it to double coverage. It was very strange.
Not strange for Jameis, but strange in general.
Very strange. I didn't see what he was seeing. A lot of times, some of them decisions are dumb, but I understand it in terms of hero ball quarterback. I see what he's seeing, that he's just trying to believe in his arm and squeeze one in some impossible slot, and it goes slightly wrong and he gets picked. That's usually Jameis. I didn't see that. It was just weird. Just floating it over the middle deep with plenty of time for the two defenders to get in front of it. It's just terrible. And then at the same time, you're not taking those risks and actually getting some of those through. So you just end up with less than 150 yards and 3 picks. It's less than impressive, to say the least. And it's funny because the same week, Bo Nix put up only 110 yards and 3 picks, but also 3 touchdowns. So at least got some touchdowns with it. They could have done that for us, Jameis. But it's very dissuading. And look, you may not get a better quarterback next year based on who you bring in, assuming you don't start a young guy. But at least bring in somebody who gives you a chance to be better. I'd rather bring somebody in that has the upside, at least potential for upside, over Jameis. I think we've already seen it run its course. Let's not pretend. He didn't magically transcend from that Saints world. He's Jameis, who he is. I'd rather try to see, potentially, obviously, depending who's available, but if there is somebody who gives you a little hint, somebody that you think maybe hasn't been in a good situation yet, or something like that, I would rather you bring in somebody who's younger and might have a bit of that question mark in him over Jameis.
That whole tactic also of picking up somebody later, I feel like used to not work ever. And then all of a sudden, I feel like in the last few years, we've been seeing teams find some success in finding and in utilizing quarterbacks that have been thrown to the wayside. And I think it's because partly ties into something we've touched on this before about how teams are throwing young guys in too early and then giving up on them too early and then moving on and then clearing the house and tanking. They're doing all that kind of stuff too early and they're not having enough patience. And because of that, there's more diamonds in the rough that are getting let go or not being looked at properly and not giving their proper chance. So there's some kind of an avenue there may be open for the Browns. As far as Jameis Winston goes, I said it earlier, takes one pick. Jameis was never supposed to be any kind of a long-term solution. He was brought in to be a backup quarterback. They did not sign Jameis Winston with the intent of starting him for almost a full season. They signed Jameis Winston with the intent of him being a backup. Every team that has signed Jameis Winston since he left the Buccaneers are signing him with the intention of him being a backup because that's what he is. He's a backup. He can do great in spurts for amounts of time. But when you need to rely on him over a longer course of time, half a season, 3/4 of a season, he's going to fail. And it's not really a surprise. This is who Jameis Winston is. And so I would definitely say that I've been fully dissuaded away from the idea of playing him next year. I think the only benefit of really playing him this year has been, and this has been a real benefit, but the only benefit of playing him this year instead of DTR or something else has been that we've at least been able to see the emergence of Jerry Jeudy, even though Jameis Winston is also throwing 3 picks, and even the games where he throws touchdowns and he's still throwing a lot of picks. But even with all that, and even though Jameis is causing a lot of the losses, he's also what's keeping the team with any semblance of enjoyment and watching. So he'll have his 3 interception game, but sometimes he'll pair 4 touchdowns and 500 yards with those 3 interceptions. And in this last game, he had 146 yards, and 100 of them were to Jerry Jeudy, which is kind of crazy as far as the percentage of yards that a receiver had that a quarterback threw. But Jameis Winston really doesn't have it. If you want to play him next year, I'm actually not super against that, as long as their plan is to... obviously, there's other routes I'd rather them go, but if they draft a rookie quarterback, I'm okay with the idea of playing Jameis Winston because you're not really necessarily trying to do that much with him. You're just stalling to give your rookie quarterback more time to develop. So in that situation, I'm more or less okay with it. But there was this weird fantasy that some Browns fans had after those first couple games that Jameis was just going to start next year and basically be the quarterback of the short-term future, which was never going to happen. And so I think that idea from the very beginning was flawed, that hope. And that was a bit of like fool's gold, a little bit of Browns classic illusionment, I don't know, whatever you want to say it, involved in that. So it was never going to happen. All right. Let's talk about...
Oh, real quick, if I might just touch on one thing really quickly, just that you mentioned about young guys and developing and giving up quicker. One thing I think that affects that, I just want to mention, is that I think they're getting less development in college than ever before, as college has become such a quick tier game where everything's about coming out and doing it quickly, especially as you've gone into the world where almost all of them come out as juniors, and a lot of them are redshirting their first year. So you're getting 2 years, and where coaches in colleges are getting huge paychecks and short leashes and NIL world, and they need things to work quickly so they don't lose guys the very next year in transfer portals. It's all so quick now. They are looking not to develop guys the way they used to a lot of times, and much more often on run first, do whatever, run more simplified schemes just to get more production as quick as possible. And so I think in college they're also getting much less. And so it's taking longer, / also having the right guy who knows how to develop them in the NFL, knows how to do the extra step of development. I think that's also played a part in it.
Like college used to be a place where there was more room for mistakes, and like it was more of a playground for these talents to develop and try things out and experiment and grow. And then now, because it's more pressurized and more professionalized, let's say, they're getting shorter leashes and they're getting less time. They're redshirting and trying to get them as prepped as possible to just pump them out 1 year, 2 years, NFL, out of here.
More or less.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, more or less. I wouldn't say a playground, but that in the way they used to be a pro-ready offense, that's what they called it. It was pro-ready. They were going to run a pro-style offense. It was going to get you ready for pro-style. It was more complicated. And part of it was that they were saying they were getting you ready for the pros and that the people get drafted then from those universities. But that's just gotten by the wayside, and it's very much an athletic world, but that has come with downsides.
I get what you're saying. There's just much less NFL offenses in college, and there's less colleges maybe willing to run those college offenses in order to help players make it to the NFL because they're just trying to compete in college, and they're just forgetting about that and letting them figure it out after.
And so there's been a lot of mess on the development side of that's carried over to the NFL, and just there's been a lot less development of reading defenses, etc.
And that does really, I think, play into what the USFL could and probably should be for the NFL as a place to stash these guys and let them develop. But that's a conversation for another time. But
look, for example, at Lamar Jackson's progression. he keeps getting better at reading defenses.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to move on to Nick Chubb's injury. That was pretty brutal. He came back, obviously, a few weeks ago, and we didn't really expect to see him return to Nick Chubb levels until next year anyways, but obviously breaking his leg is going to be a little bit of a setback. We're looking at, at least a year before he comes back. So we're talking about being 3/4 of the way through next season. At that point, is he still going to even be with the team? I think that's become a big question. And there's a few reasons for that. This is the last season of Nick Chubb's contract, so he will be a free agent. So that's reason number one. Reason number two why this might be his last game as a Brown is he will be on the other side of 30. Typically, not a good place you want to be as a running back, especially not where you want to be as a running back coming off back-to-back injuries. The next idea is his cap hit, that there's this expectation that he was going to cost more, although I will say with these injuries now happening back-to-back, there's, I think, a different avenue. Because I think basically before, fans were thinking that they're going to have to pay him $6-7 million a year, and with all the cap hits and cap games they've been playing and, having to pay that up now, I think a lot of fans thought that they were just going to let Nick Chubb go and just say, look, other side of $37 million a year for a running back, we're not going to do it. But with back-to-back injuries, the team does gain a whole lot of leverage now to potentially bring him back on only like $2 million a year. So that door actually might have opened back up in a way, almost more so because of the injury. So I'm just saying, in a way, it could be argued that he's actually more likely to play again for the Browns with the injury rather than less likely, because it will have devalued him to the point where the Browns actually could bring him back, even just as a nice gesture and let him compete. But what do you think? Will Nick Chubb play another game for the Cleveland Browns?
Not likely. Yeah. Like I said, things went rough. So as you start to hit just about 30 as a running back, coming off a big injury, and then get injured again, there's a decent chance you're going for pretty cheap. So don't rule it out. He might be like, hey, I don't feel like chasing a bunch of dogs around anymore. I'm not running for everywhere, like running back. And, to my career, probably don't have a lot of years left. I don't feel like running around different cities trying to chase a paycheck to get one more year in. I'm going to see if the Browns offer me something. I'm going to come back at a low price and see if I can make it work here to get, another two based off some performance here, here, etc. Get a house here and all that. But I think more likely the Browns don't have much available in the tank to pay him. They don't have a lot available for players at all right now with the cap space where it is and all that. And I think they're more likely to look to draft a guy. And for Chubb, chances are, there's that, a little in terms of talent and has plenty of cap room that thinks, hey, I want a chance on this guy, low reward, give him, 2.5 is more than the Browns are going to give him, with some upside. With the girls, give him that shot. And I think considering that's near the end of his career and, he doesn't have contracts left in him, and I think he knows that. Considering all that's happened, he'll go out and take that cash. So more likely, we'll see him play out 1 to 2 more years somewhere else. And if he can find his own form, you never know. But getting another injury after all that just makes it seem exceedingly unlikely.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to...
Back is a tragedy in the NFL, right? They
yes,
are the
in
cigarette.
general,
They're
exactly.
bright and short.
Yeah. If you had to put a percentage on it, what do you think you'd put it at? Like percentage that he does play again 15% for the Browns.
15% that he plays for us again?
I think I actually have it at about a 50-50 because I do think 50-50. That there's a... Yeah, I think the chance that his value will have been devalued enough by the second injury and him being on this out of 30. I could see the Browns bringing him back on some kind of a minimum deal, almost like I said, as a nice gesture. And then because of that, he ends up playing in some capacity. So I actually do think there is an avenue in that way, but we'll see. I think over the offseason, we're going to hear a lot of rumblings and we're going to find out what's going on. But then, the NFL is a world, and it would not be out of character for an NFL team to just cut him loose like nothing. And then the fan base moans about it, and the team just doesn't care at all. So we'll see. All right. Next segment. Are the Browns still a quarterback away? Coming into the season, it was understood by everybody, including us, that if Deshaun Watson pans out, the Browns are going to be a playoff team and potentially even a Super Bowl contender, and it was all dependent on the QB. How far the QB goes was going to be how far the Browns go, because they were seen as a team that is loaded at every position on both sides of the ball, and it was simply a matter of the QB. The Browns are obviously now 3-11 right now, not where they thought they would be. there's a lot of talk about fans, about everyone's pointing fingers in every which way, and not just at the quarterback, and saying, hey, this team is losing a lot of games. It's not just the QB. But what do you think? Do you think that the Browns are actually still a QB away?
A QB away, for understand, there's also different versions of a QB away. So, like, for example, they're not Vikings away. The Vikings were a dynamic duo of receivers and a couple decent ones behind them, too. Great O-line, good with Aaron Jones coming in, really good play calling head coach, great defense, brilliant defense that keeps teams when they just need someone to pilot the ship. I don't think the Browns are that kind of QB away where I just need a guy to pilot it and not a loser. And kind of the way the Niners did for a few years where it's like, hey, we just need someone to run the ship, maybe make a few plays late. Here, 1 second. Sorry.
Good.
They're not that level one play QB away. They're more like, yeah, we're going to need a good bot. This is an offense that has shown it can produce good quarterbacks, like I should say. So you feel like if you get a good guy, there's the opportunity. Jerry Jeudy, phenomenal. You've got talent behind him. You've got Njoku, you've got more, and hopefully Tillman when he can come back, etc. You've got some guys you can put in there. You've got some talent. They're not bereft. The defense done better than they've looked at times this year. You got to remember, defenses get gas, and a lot of times when teams take those huge jumps with a young quarterback, the defense is playing better by statistics because they're not on the field as much, because they get more opportunities to rest, and they're not getting gassed all the time. That makes a big difference. The other team doesn't get many times to check out their scheme, doesn't get as many opportunities to try it and then figure them out, et cetera, et cetera. They get with a lead where the other team is maybe on an obvious passing down and they get to pin their ears back and rush the passer, et cetera, et cetera. So they can have a big effect, and I think the Browns defense has held up at times. And throughout this game, they were keeping the game close for a while, and I don't think they played badly at all. And I think you can see that and realize that, hey, if the Browns offense is playing better, they're going to look better at the end of the day when the box scores all tallied up.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, because you have talent, you look at a guy like Ford who makes a couple big plays. Yeah, you need a step the middle, but you really just need a guy who's going to put up like a half yards a carry. Who's a solid running back and give you some power up the middle and be a bit of a bell cow. It's not nothing, but it's also not impossible to find. It's not the same thing as looking for like a Saquon Barkley. There's a lot more of those guys. It's much more possible. And you're probably looking for a guy like that. Maybe you're looking at a little receiver depth if Elijah Moore isn't coming back. And that's about it.
Yeah.
It's not crazy. There is, hopefully you go back to fancy calling the plays. There's a play caller. I think you are a quarterback away, absolutely. Now, can they get that quarterback and a quarterback who's ready to play at that level this coming up year? That's a lot more questionable. But I think if you can get that kind of quarterback play, yeah, I think that could always do a lot for a team, but the team has a lot of talent on offense, and you've seen that already. And the defense, when they're not getting to do a lot for you, so it's not such a leap to me. Although the special teams also needs a little bit of... The special teams does need some cleaning up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay, it's not that QB is the only position on the entire team that needs, some improvement. But more than other sport I personally have ever watched, and I've actually watched a lot of sports, a lot of like different kinds of sports, but more than any other one that I've ever seen, everything that happens on the field is interlocking. They're like cogs in a clock, to quote I think Incredibles. They all have to work together, and they all affect each other mightily. If you have a poor O-line, your receivers' numbers are going to go down because the quarterback's not going to have enough time to see them. If, your pass rush isn't getting pressure, your corners are going to look worse than they really are because the opposing quarterback is going to have more time, and then your corners are never expected to cover for that long, and eventually they're going to hit them. All of these players on the defense and the offense are affected by players 2 and 3 steps before them and ahead of them and all around them. It's all interlocking. That's why you tend to see such big swings in the NFL versus other leagues. I think you tend to see big jumps forward, big jumps back, forward, big jumps back. A team go from 3 wins to 11 wins 1 year next. Not that that's so common, but it happens, and partly is because what you're saying. Sometimes the QB is the missing piece in more ways than people realize. It's more than just they need a better quarterback. It's that when there's a better quarterback, now all of a sudden they navigate the pocket a little better. They have a better communication with their offensive line, and so the offensive line is able to protect them better, which gives them a little bit more time, which gives them more time to get to the receivers. Then all of a sudden you learn that your receivers aren't that bad. Again, we've seen that just this year, where it looked like all of our receivers were a massive flop, and then all of a sudden Jameis comes in, and Jameis hasn't exactly helped the team win a bunch of games, but he has made it easier for us to see that Jerry Jeudy is good. Then, in fact, not only is Jerry Jeudy not overvalued, he may potentially be on one of the best wide receiver contracts in the NFL come the end of the season. the quarterback affects so many different things. And yeah, the defense has been better. They've gotten credit for. They haven't been amazing, but they've actually not been that bad. A lot of what they've looked worse is because they're constantly put in bad positions by turnovers, and they're on the field way longer than they were previous years. And when you're on the field a lot, you're just gonna give up more points by just statistical, not probability, just statistically, right? So yeah, I actually do think this is still a QB away. Doesn't mean there's no other upgrades to make. Like you said, adding somebody on that running game might be nice. Maybe adding another rotational piece on the defensive line. There's other things that can be done. But I would not be surprised if this team goes out, drafts, if they can get a Bo Nix type of rookie, like nothing crazy, but just decent. And I would not be shocked if this team can get back to 10 wins next year because there's so many ripple effects from every position on that football field. Yeah, absolutely. Even though it may look like there's more than one thing going on, a good QB or a better QB can even improve the entire defense for all of those reasons that you and I both mentioned. Levi, is there anything else you want to add to that before we move on?
Not especially right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know because you really talk that much, so I don't want to. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I was like, I didn't want to just hand that off to you in case you don't really have it in the tank. It kind of sounds like you're near the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna knock up, but we do still have our last segment here, Brownie Points segment. If you're a first time listener, Brownie Points segment is where we award Brownie Points. Great name, right? To the standout players on offense and to the standout players on defense. We give out 3, 2, and 1. We talked a little bit pre-taping of the show, so we know that on defense, we're not really giving out brownie points on defense. Although the Brown defense hasn't been that bad in that game, and they really were actually pretty decent. They were just put in a lot of bad positions. However, that doesn't mean that there was necessarily a standout individual player either. On offense, we both agreed that we wanted to give Jerry Jeudy 2 brownie points. We didn't have anybody at 3, and we did not have anybody at 1, but we did want to give those 2 to Jerry Jeudy. 11 grabs, 108 yards, 14 targets. Really, really nice game from him. Continuing to show the NFL and the Browns fan base that he is more than what we thought he was. And that's certainly been true for me. And I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add.
Yeah, just it's special to see a guy not just be good, get attention in a game where they can't really pass and you can't really move. You still end up with an impressive stat day. Because that's
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
Everybody knows you're good. You're playing good defense. Who is one of the best corners in the league in Trent McDuffie, and you're still gonna produce and put up 100 yards on that stat sheet.
Yeah.
So that's not something I'd show you doing. That's
Yeah.
a different level.
And in the coming weeks, we're going to be having a discussion again about Jerry Jeudy as a number 1, which we started talking a little bit when he was breaking out, and we said that we're going to give it time because it's about how you respond to teams that begin to circle you as the number 1 receiver and to begin giving you that special treatment. But so far, he is showing that even with that attention, he can still produce. I mean, Jameis Winston threw 146, he got 108 of them, so that's pretty impressive in my book. All right. We are going to wrap that up right there for you. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.